I want to talk about some stereotypes that people have about scientists and what scientists and science communicators can do to help overcome some of those stereotypes. And the good news is that social psychologists and other social science researchers, they've studied stereotypes not just about how people view scientists, but how people view all kinds of different professions in society. This is from Fisk and Dupree, two social psychologists who were based at Princeton University when they were doing this research. And if you look at this, there's two measures here. There's warmth and there's competence. And I'll give you a second to find scientists on this chart. They are over on the right here. They're viewed as very competent, and they're kind of in the middle on warmth. So what are competence and warmth? Competence is, are you good at your job? Are you skillful at what you do? Do you have the smarts and competitiveness to succeed in your profession? And warmth is, what do you care about? Do you care about yourself? Do you care about other people? Do you maybe care about me, right? So scientists are viewed as competent, but a little bit cold. Now look on the upper right part of the chart, though. What do you see there? You see professors, teachers, doctors, and nurses. So my opinion about what's going on here is that people don't really know what scientists do day to day or why it matters. As compared to somebody like nurses or doctors, it's obvious what they do. They save lives, they care for patients. We know why they do that too. They're compassionate, right? It's sort of obvious. Teachers teach. A lot of teachers, they just love their students. It's really evident. Professors profess, which is to say that they also teach. They also pass knowledge on to the next generation. We have some good sense of why they do what they do. So if you're a scientist, if you're a researcher, if you're an academic communicator, what can you do to combat these stereotypes? I think you can help people understand why you do what you do a little bit better, but do it within this context. Help them understand the service that your science is providing to society writ large, to individual people, to businesses, to policymakers, you name it. And you really want to help folks fill in the blanks here, because I think what this research shows, what a lot of our practical experience shows, is that in the absence of helping people fill in these blanks, they're just going to make up their own stories, right? They're going to reach for the nearest stereotype. And Gavin Schmidt, a NASA climate researcher who's talked and thought a lot about this, he'll point out that definitely happens to climate scientists. If you don't say why you're there, what you're doing, why you're speaking up, why you're communicating, people reach for that nearest explanation. And sometimes those explanations are really weird, right? That scientists are in it for the grant money because folks just don't know how the grant making process works. Those sort of stereotypes too. So what can you do to combat this? What can you do to help people fill in these blanks? I'd say the first thing is to know your own path, know your own story that you want to tell, be personal, and share why you do, what your personal path was to figuring this stuff out. Maybe you liked big machines when you were a kid, and maybe you were the type of kid who tore the toaster apart to your parents' chagrin. Maybe you took long nature walks. Maybe you were the type of person who collected bugs in a jar, and you were that kid who turned into a scientist. For me, for my work in science communication, I talk about going to see the tokamak fusion generator when I was a little kid and really being blown away by that. In part because of the technology and because I got to meet scientists, but also because I realized at the end of the tour that the tokamak fusion generator might not be there because of congressional funding. And I had never made that connection before as a kid, that all of that Congress stuff, all that policymaking stuff could have an impact on science, which I was so curious and passionate about. Which brings me to my second point, which is be curious. Show off your curiosity. That is, in my experience, the number one emotional core of why scientists do what they do. Scott Mandia, who's an award-winning science communicator, really talented guy, he likes to tell his students, particularly students take his meteorology and geology classes, really think about why scientists do what they do. You're getting dropped off, in some polar wasteland somewhere or via helicopter. You're going to be stuck there for months. Are you doing that because you want the grant money? Are you doing that because you're going to become king or queen of the cryosphere now? No, you're doing it because you're curious, because you genuinely have this intense desire to take a bunch of ice core samples or do a bunch of air samples to uncover new knowledge, right? So you're willing to do that sort of stuff. So I think curiosity is the number one emotion that scientists should be talking about when they want to help people understand what their motivations are. You also want to be transparent. Whatever sort of public communication thing you're doing, you want to tell people why you're there and what your goals are, right? You want to just be transparent. So if you're testifying before policymakers, you want to tell them why you think your science is important for the policymaking they're doing and why you feel like it's important for you to inform them. If you're giving a public lecture, tell the audience why you think it's important to share your scientific research with them. And maybe you just want to demonstrate the utility of your scientific research to an audience. Maybe that's important to you. Just be transparent about that. Again, whatever your goals are, because you want people to know what you think they are. You don't want them to just fill in the blank. And on that one in particular, I think you actually have to dig a little bit deeper personally and understand, well, why do I want to publicly communicate in the first place? You have to ask those questions yourself before you can answer them publicly. And the last tip, the last approach you can take for this sort of thing is just to be real, right? Don't go for, in pro wrestling, it's called a cheap pop, right? If you're a pro wrestler and you go out there and you say, how about that local sports team? Or how about that local city? That's a cheap pop in pro wrestling parlance. And I feel like that comes up a lot in all sorts of communication stuff, including science communication. Don't go for the cheap pop. Don't mention the local sports team unless you're truly a fan of the local sports team and can credibly prove your fandom in a very specific way. Similarly, a lot of scientists will talk about seeing the stuff that they work on through the eyes of their kids, through the eyes of that next generation. And that's obviously very real and very credible for those scientists. What I would say is go beyond that and talk specifically about your kid and your relationship with your kid and give the audience something unique. Really think about why your specific relationship with your kid makes that special, not just a general relationship that maybe any parent or any kid can conceptualize around your work. Get specific, because it's that specific stuff that makes your story credible. It's that specific stuff that sticks with audiences and helps them really remember and put your work in context when they're thinking about it later. So I hope that's helpful. This is stuff that is still counterintuitive in a lot of science communication, but I think folks are getting better at it. And I think especially in the modern communications environment, where everything is very individualized, where everything is very personal, where it's very easy to get transparent access to information, I think audiences are demanding this sort of stuff from us, and they're demanding this in science communication from scientists. So I think it's the right thing to do, to give them this sort of information. I think it enhances rather than undermines our credibility when we're doing science communication, and I think it's fundamentally important to connecting with modern audiences. Thanks.